Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is of particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Speaking of Patreons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon. So a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Rob H, Ben White, Maximum Gravy, Austin Whitsitt, John Keys, Julian Jeremiah, Tommy Swagnett, Michael Kahn, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Mel B. Styles, Troy Shuker, Bose Nail, Samson, Maris, Harry Blade, Mobile Max 777, Neo the One, Lost Cat FE, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Del West Watson, Mike, Muted, Dick Earth Skeptic, Maria Neelands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, The Real Gabster, Liam Nedrick Jr., Abraham Mohammed, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic936, Life is Short, theflatearthchannel.com, Texas Mike, and David Wayne Foster. So another massive, huge thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Now I will hand over to whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their dulcet tones while I set up for today's live show.
I'm going to start calling those lens earthers.
The ones that are asserting that the horizon's curving at altitude.
Yeah, they're lens earthers.
I sent that picture strictly for the dive. I didn't even take notice to that until I looked at it again, that I realized what you're talking about. But you know something? That indoctrination is so deep, and it did such a good job. My wife out of nowhere will show me something and be like, can they really, can this really not be true? I don't know what it is.
If a lie's big enough to be at a societal level, people just automatically assume that a lie couldn't be that big. When one of the principles, or one of the Nazi principles of propaganda, was to make the lie as big as possible.
That actually makes sense. But you know, I think it's her upbringing too, because she's Guyanese, so they were brought up very respectful to respect authority, and that's just the way it is. Although she does, understand that the Earth is flat, she'll just come across some things on TikTok, and I could see it like, how can this be? Like, why would they teach us it in school?
Yeah.
Why would they teach you what in school?
The heliocentric belief. That's the thing. Like, why would they teach us it in school? Why, I guess it goes back to why would they lie? Shit, I don't know.
The one world religion, that's why.
Well, they've always taught things that are wrong in school. I mean, if you'd went to school 500 years ago, you'd have been told that drilling holes in people's heads let out the demons, They do.
That's pretty clever. So you drill a hole in somebody's head to let the demon out? There's a few holes I'd like to drill in.
Yeah, it's called trepanning.
That was a nice dive, though, dude. That's crazy, because the camera guy also did the dive with him and filmed them going all the way down. That's insane.
Yeah, for some... excuse me, one sec. For some reason, the black swan just hasn't seemed to translate it across to high altitude horizons. And there's been several instances now where I'm like, what are you talking about? The horizon's not Earth curve. But our opponents, who obviously are aware of the argument, haven't quite cottoned on that it's not just the horizon that you use with your curve maths. You guys also think that the horizon is something that can bend or not bend at altitude? Either way, you're reifying it into the Earth curve edge and just saying the Earth curve edge isn't bent at this altitude. You wouldn't expect to see the physical Earth curve edge. That would be the horizon you reify in your sphere model to bend at this altitude, or isn't bending at this altitude. Both assume you've got a physical sphere edge for a horizon, and it isn't.
Yeah, the Bitcoin guy tried that. I like the way you stop it right before it even gets started, though. Not Earth curve is not the horizon. The horizon is not Earth curve.
Right, yeah, he's trying to take it up into a second law of thermodynamics violation and point out and say, see, it's curving. What, the horizon? Huh?
Yeah, the non-physical debunked with the black swan apparent position where the sky meets the ground according to a definition that's pretty clear in terms of what they require on a sphere. That would be a geometric horizon. So once you go up in altitude now, let's forget about the fact that the horizon isn't Earth curve, because up here it's bending. It's still not Earth curve. Doesn't matter if it's bending. Who cares?
Correct. I think we need to flood the internet with a bunch of black swans. Because for some reason, they do not acknowledge the black swan.
What, you mean they don't acknowledge the defeat in their argument? You're shocking that, given that they're a
Correct.
cult.
That's correct.
Well, you know, the Earth has geometry. It just lacks shape.
Yeah, flat geometry.
I'm sorry. I said that backwards. The Earth has shape. It lacks geometry.
That's just stupid.
They're interchangeable. Yeah, no. It is stupid, but a lot of people believe that. Or anti-flat earthers believe that. A lot of anti-flat earthers.
Well, if you remember, it all starts at the horizon. Remember that little thing Chocolate posted about
How
the
to
flat
debate.
Earth thing?
Yeah, how to
Right.
debate flat earthers. Now listen, children of the globe. It all starts with the horizon. Just remember to reify that into a physical geometric sphere edge called Earth curve, and you'll be sweet from there on in.
Just don't listen to anything they say because they're not worried about evidence. Don't you ever talk to them about evidence. Try to gain their trust.
Gain their trust, and make sure they understand how the cult works so that you can welcome them back when you give them a half-arsed explanation for something that's been debunked.
And don't forget my grandson. His teacher warned him that this was going to happen.
And if all else fails, assert that the majority think you're right.
Now, what is that? An appeal to consensus?
Yeah. If everyone believes that trepanning releases demons from your skull, therefore go and get your skull drilled and just put a coin in to fill the hole. Yeah? If everybody believes that that is the way to go, then that is the way to go. Because everybody believes that drilling holes in skulls releases demons. Therefore, releasing demons when drilling holes in skulls. Just affirm the consequent with your belief and your consensus opinion.
Call it science, too. Don't forget to call it science.
Oh yeah, my bad. Drilling holes in skulls are also science. Therefore, mass acceptance and consensus means that that's really what's happening.
But they don't know. They don't know what science is. They've mistaken pseudoscience for science.
Yeah, they have. Correct, Neil. That's how we were all deceived. Magic word of science. Teach them young it's empirical, and then later use every magic trick in the book to assert that you've got something that you haven't. Say the word science when you don't.
We know an alternative without the null would almost be like as close to an affirming the consequent, you know? Like if you have the alternative but you don't formulate a null and you never test it, it would just be an affirming the consequent if you accepted it as truth.
Correct. I was waiting for you to say if you never tested it. Absolutely spot on. You're taking the hypothesis without a null, the antithesis of your prediction, to be the explanation. If A, then B, supposition of cause, I think, and will later test that A causes B. Just ignore the test, ignore the null, which is if A, not B. Ignore that completely and just say, here you go, here's my hypothesis. If A, then B. And if you don't know what a hypothesis is, that would be a supposition yet to be tested. You just take it as an explanation. So if A, then B. So A, therefore B. I see. Great explanation. What you say? Your explanation's actually a hypothesis. Wow, that sounds scientific.
But we all know that's not science.
Mistaking the hypothesis for an explanation, which it isn't. It's a supposition yet to be validated.
Yeah, but when they're affirming the consequent fails, it makes a beautiful modus tollens.
Yes. You don't even have to have a real phenomena. If trepanning, then demon release. Demon release. Because of trepanning. That's just that simple. Affirm the consequent with your if A, then B. In this case, if A is drilling holes in heads, and B, the naturally, obviously occurring phenomena, is the demons inside people.
So what would you call the deliverance churches that claim that they cast out the demon and you vomit it out?
Talking nonsense, Neil. What do you want me to say? They're just talking nonsense.
It is nonsense.
Generally, vomiting is caused by something inside you that's poisonous. Now, if you've got something inside you that's poisonous and someone can get that out of you by whatever means, then great, because you need to. But chances are your body would expel anything that was poisonous naturally by that means if it could.
Yeah, and if a physical reaction could expel a demon, then how many demons can dance on the head of a pin?
Well, that shows you how gullible people are. You'll have congregations filled to brim, and you'll have supposed pastors out there casting out demons and people vomiting all over the place. That's how gullible they are. People need gurus.
Well, sometimes I wonder, like, if it hadn't been for the black swan, like figuring out that the horizon, you know, wasn't geometric, if I would have ever seen through the deception.
Only you can answer that question.
I don't think I would have.
Gas pressure out of container? How are you going to get around that, John?
Well, I mean, I thought I was measuring a sphere. It had to be a vacuum if I lived on a sphere. I didn't know why. I didn't know how. But it had to be if I lived on a sphere.
Good morning.
Hi, 10th.
While you're 10th.
Neil, just like the navigators think the sextant is working on the curve surface, is what John is trying to explain. That they're in that paradigm. They're just not thinking clearly through the tool. The tool cannot work on the curved surface. It's like saying in one statement, it's a glorified protractor, and then showing a protractor with a 180 baseline. And then you say, so this is how a sextant works. I go, yeah, basically. The altitude of the sun to the horizon. And I go, and where did the two lines meet? Well, they meet at me holding the sextant. And then you account for dip correction to get a geometric. And then what? Well, that's how it works. Yeah, you just describe the straight line to the GP of the sun for thousands of years.
Hang on, you got to put me on.
Yeah, no, I'm just getting it to squad.
822222. Hello?
Six.
Hello?
Hello, sorry.
That's okay. Carry on. You've got 60 seconds left.
Yeah, so when they see it and someone jars them, like John got jarred with the black swan, he realized it wasn't a measurement. That clicked it. The minute he realized it wasn't a measurement, that clicked it. Right, John?
Right, because you can only measure what is. And I thought that I was measuring what is, which was Earth curve.
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also, below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is a particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. Now, we are joined by 10th Man, Neil, Refracted Curvature, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Good morning, everyone.
Hey, good morning.
Hello, hello, hello.
How are you?
Mighty fine, pretty good. Nice to have an enthusiastic start from Discord. Very good, very good. Any evidence of physical geometric sphere edge horizon, the one we were discussing in the pre-show that can't be measured? It's formerly known as Earth curvature.
I think refracted curvature should do this one.
Hello. Well, if it was geometric, you could derive a radius from it.
Hey, Owen.
And is
Hello?
it? Hey, Arwin.
How's my sound?
Very good. And is it geometric, so you can derive a radius from it?
Oh, no. No, black swan.
Yeah, further to that, we're navigating on a flat plane.
But I'd like to ask John to give a short testimonial here as to why the black swan brought him over from the globe side.
Well, because you can only measure what is, and I thought I was measuring the geometry of Earth, the horizon, but that's, the minute that went away, then the only measurement I have left is it's flat.
Well, expand on how the black swan actually opened your eyes. What did the black swan prove to you?
It disproved that the horizon was geometric, so I couldn't derive a radius value to assert that there was Earth curve.
Might as well go through the black swan argument. So if the Earth was a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles, then every distance to the horizon, that's the geometric Earth curve edge, could be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That's a la the geometric curve calculator mathematics. Now, the distance to the horizon in the black swan is beyond the geometric limitation of a sphere at radius 3959. Therefore, the horizon is not Earth curve, and the Earth is not a sphere. Any shape would necessitate a physical geometric limitation to your view that would be capable of measurement. And our horizon isn't Earth curve.
Now, why everybody hasn't responded the way John has responded to it is beyond my understanding. Because if you do not have a geometric horizon, there is no Earth curve, and Earth is not a ball. How they all didn't come, their eyes immediately open up is beyond my understanding.
Well, they want to retain their
wanna know
fundamentalist
why?
religious globe faith. So, the automatic discounting of anything that contradicts your faith is going to be prevalent in a cult-like worship of a religion that isn't real, in this case heliocentrism. So they don't want to relinquish it, so they just reject anything out of hand that debunks their claim. Their claim is we've got Earth curve. Their claim is we can measure Earth curve. Their claim is that the Earth curve blocks things in the distance. The Earth curve doesn't block things in the distance. It's not a physical geometric limitation to your view. It's beyond the limitations if it was. Therefore, the Earth is not a sphere. We don't have an Earth curve edge horizon, and we don't have any geometry at the horizon to measure and assert that we're on any shape other than a flat plane.
Well, I think Newton said it best when he said they lack a competent faculty of philosophical reasoning.
Yeah. You can't, in reasonable cognitive faculty, appreciate the horizon to be something it isn't. It's not Earth curve. Now, that's a fact. It's the end of the argument, really. There is no more argument in terms of whether or not Earth is a flat plane. There's no geometric horizon, and there would be if we were on any shape. Doesn't matter if it's a banana or a sphere, we'd have a geometric horizon to observe, and we don't. There's only one conclusion you can draw, that's that we're on a flat plane. Now, when you navigate around the flat plane, utilising the geometry of the flat plane, then you get around without any issue. As long as you assume that what you do when you measure it, that would be utilise its flatness, is actually the case.
I'd like to take a stab at Neil's proposition, why people don't get it. But people do get it. The people I talk to who aren't anti-flat earthers get it. They get that black swan argument right away. It's the people that we attract on the show in chat and whatever means otherwise, they're the ones bracing against it. So our recent memories are with the anti-flat earthers. They're just not going to let go of it. But when you take it to the average person, and they don't excuse you right away because of the stigma of flat earth, they'll say, well, I know you, you're smart. Why do you believe in flat earth? If they have that conscience about you, they get it. So the only people I haven't been able to share it with are people who are part of the consensus-driven conspiracy. Oh, he's a flat earther, so he's okay. So I can't reach them because the media's already got them, blocking any avenue of conversation, and anti-flat earthers. But everybody else who's willing to have a discussion, well, yeah, that makes sense. Well, wow, I never thought of that. So they get it, Neil.
Yeah, but the anti-flat earthers are the kind of people who will tell me that my reference frames I don't claim and are absolutely required by a sphere Earth to make a claim that it's spinning are ruined, because we've debunked their claim that Earth will turn underneath objects not attached to cause Coriolis deflection. We point out that there is no Coriolis deflection to observe, and they tell us that our reference frames, that would be flat Earth reference frames we don't need and haven't got, are ruined. That's the extent they'll go to. They'll debunk their own claim in the first instance rather than concede that we've debunked it. Black Swan's so different.
I've never heard you say any argument for reference frames to hold the position you hold. It's their position, and it's so embarrassing they got to cast it on you.
Yeah, once it fails, they project the failure of their globe model onto us and tell us that our reference frames we don't claim have been ruined. You're like, no, there are no reference frames that we're going to be claiming, because we're not claiming we're spinning. You are. You have two of them, Earth turning underneath the other, to observe drift at 15 degrees an hour, according to the globe claim. We point out it doesn't happen, and they say, you and your reference frames are ruined. Here's an example of someone not drifting. yeah, wonderful. Other than the globe claims that you will see drift, and we don't. So you showing me someone moving but not drifting doesn't help you, other than giving you an excuse to beg the question that we're not going to see this affect the globe claims. That would be Coriolis drift. Well, you saying that we're not going to see it and assuming we're spinning anyway doesn't help you. It's just a begging the question fallacy. But to do that, you've got to assert that my reference frames are ruined when you show we don't have them. When that's our argument. We say we don't have 2 reference frames to show drift. So you think that's me making a claim that we should have them? Idiots. They'll deny their own globe claim to get around the fact that they can't prove it happens.
I remember watching Neil deGrasse Tyson in a setting with, like, he's in a high-rise office and there's a big window pane behind him, and he's in a chair and the other person in the YouTube videos in a chair. And Neil leans over and says, the Earth is spinning this fast right now? And obviously you don't see anything that proves that. No one feels the spin. It's kind of like accepted and believed, but there's no proof for it. Then the same Neil deGrasse Tyson will go and say that in the Cincinnati Bengals football game, when the field goal kicker kicked the ball and it was going through the uprights, it was Earth turn that helped it a smidgen bit, because he did a quick math and he saw the way the stadium was set, the north, south, east, west version of that argument, and it was a quarter bit of a turn of the Earth that caused it to dink off the left upright. So this same guy is saying there's 2 reference frames, the inertial and the non-inertial. But in the office, he's saying you can't tell. But in the football example, you can tell. Well, what about the hot air balloon? What about the airplane?
The effect that's claimed is Coriolis drift. That is an observation of things seeming to drift because you turn beneath them. So, for example, if you launch a helium balloon from a roundabout, as you turn beneath it, it looks like it's spiralling up into the air, when in reality it's just going straight up if there's no wind. Directly up. Well, it's not spiralling, you're turning underneath it, which makes it look like that happens. Yeah? Now, let's say there's a string that's hundreds of meters long coming off the helium balloon as it goes up. Yeah? As you turn beneath it, you will still hit the string that's coming off the bottom of the balloon as it goes up. Now, you'll see that string come towards you. It's not, it's just going straight up and the string's just extending upwards. But from your vantage point, it looks like you're moving towards the string as it goes up in the air. So that's a deflection from your vantage point, an apparent deflection. You see it happen. You see the string coming towards you, and then it lightly grazes over your head, and then you spin away from it, then it comes back again. Well, that's all because you're turning underneath something. That's Coriolis effect. Well, that is the effect globe Earth claims to have. So when you say, what about balloons? Well, if Earth has Coriolis effect, then like with the roundabout, a hot air balloon takes off what is claimed to be a rotating surface. That would be Earth. So therefore, we're going to move towards it as it goes up then. Oh no, that doesn't happen. Yeah, that's us debunking the claim that the globe has Coriolis effect. Enter anti-flat earther to tell us that my reference frames are ruined, that I'm not claiming and actually debunking. Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety? That would be Earth spinning.
Nope.
You're going to need R for that.
You are going to need R for that. Any evidence of the R value, Earth radius?
You're going to need an axis turning, which doesn't exist, so no. You're going to need R for that.
Now you're going to need curve for that.
Yeah, you will need a geometric physical sphere edge for a horizon to acquire the geometry to get R as measured by Al-Biruni. So yeah, you're going to need Earth curve for that R value. We've debunked that though. I still can't get over Arwin's excellent point yesterday. We were praising Arwin and saying how much we missed him in the yesterday. He came in and pointed out that when you're making the claim for an angle measurement on the surface to how far a star is above the horizon, for example, that when you claim that on the globe after the fact, after making the measurement, the claim from the globe cannot have you even holding the sextant anymore. The angle's taken from the centre of the Earth. In other words, it's a concession on their part that you can't do this on a globe, because to do it on a globe involves having the angle come from the centre of Earth, when you're actually holding a sextant on the surface. So that summary was given by Arwin after Brian's logic, who's just come in, and 10th Man got this argument to the point where we could understand it well enough to concisely summarise it. I say we, it was actually Arwin.
I'm not sure if I'm the first one to bring that point up, though.
Adam was, who's just jumped. As soon as I mentioned it, Adam and Brian, the two main players in this argument, joined the hangout. So as much as I'm giving praise, it was originally 10th, then Brian, who made this point clear. And then Adam summarised it in terms of how that mathematically translates into a bait and switch from the surface angle being measured to an assumption of a central angle twisting through the centre of a sphere. In other words, you're no longer holding the sextant when you claim that degree of change. You're not holding the sextant to claim the degree change, even though you're measuring it on the surface. Well, that bait and switch is when they say, well, the angle's no different. If it's stars at an infinite distance, the angle's very little difference between what we're actually doing, which is angle from the centre of a sphere, to what you're actually measuring. That's what Bob the science guy said. Now, when he did it, I didn't notice that what he's actually doing is baiting and switching an angle measurement on the surface, true, with a sextant, true angles, straight lines measured, to something that you cannot physically do anymore. So to put it mildly, you can't do this on a sphere, and Adam pointed out the bait and switch. So Alvin just pointed out, and said, so what they're actually saying is you can't do this on a sphere, literally, even in depiction. It's not being done on a sphere. It's being done at the centre of a sphere that you're not holding a sextant at. But Adam, 10th, Brian, Arwin, and most importantly me, take all the credit for this.
Yeah, well, my emphasis point was that first they use the sextant, then they measure up these angles, and then in the model, suddenly they moved the actual angle point away from the sextant, like as if in their model, suddenly they throw the sextant overboard in the water and then assume it's going to sink to the center of the Earth. That's the part that really stood out to me.
Great summary. But wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Adam, 10th Man, Brian, and obviously me, because I'm very integral to all this. Not at all.
Well, you're touching upon what might be the slogan for 2022 right here.
The year of the sun.
Yes, because see, they've got Hipparchus led everyone astray by saying everything's at an infinite distance. So they've got Eratosthenes and everybody else saying light's coming in parallel. Well, with light coming in parallel in their mind, but not in reality, the angle at the surface matches the angle at the center. There's many problems there, as you've already noted. No one's at the center with a sextant, so that's a begging the question, and it's ridiculous. So really, the measurement's from the surface. So if the measurement's really from the surface, is light coming in parallel still? No, light is coming in divergent. So they're going to lose on every single point. There's nothing to hold on to once you break it down. Light doesn't come in parallel, so it destroys that fantasy that the angle from the center matches the angle on the surface. And no one's at the center with the sextant. The sextant is on the top of their so-called sphere with a curved bottom. And since it's a glorified protractor, it can never work with a curved bottom. Protractors do not work with a curved bottom. They have a straight 180.
I wonder if Hipparchus was actually saying it's like, how they ascribe things to people that point out the faults. He was really saying, there's no way that's possible. They'd have to be an infinite distance away. And they were like, Hipparchus just said they're an infinite distance away, so put him down for it.
That was done. I can't remember who it was, though. Jaren originally pointed it out. It was a similar sort of thing.
Tycho Brahe.
Brahe, right. So they can't possibly be at that distance. They'd be absolutely enormous. Brahe says they're enormous. You can't possibly ascribe innate gravity to this shit. Don't ever associate my name with this. You know what we'll call it? We'll call it Newtonian. Bastards. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
Well, it should be over there, but it's too clouded to be sure where it is or whether it actually exists when you don't see it.
Alrighty then. Anyone from Discord? Distance the sun? Any flatties in that want to claim it? I thought when we started talking about triangulation, we'd be inundated with flatties claiming that they could get the distance from this. Right? No one else?
Shouldn't we know that
Go on.
it's an apparent position? So how do you triangulate an apparent position that's always moving?
Spot on, I couldn't have said it better myself. But that doesn't stop a lot of... I don't want to use a derogatory term that our anti-flat earth opponents use for us when they stereotype us with these people. So I don't want to be too derogatory. People who have a model of a flat earth and therefore ascribe a distance to the celestial object. Yeah, like I say, I thought they'd be in here in a heartbeat going, hang on, we'll use this to claim... What do they say it is? 4,000 kilometres, something like
The,
Something
those,
like that. But
Go
that
on,
was
Brian.
like in the
those,
olden days of like FE, wasn't it? Like around closer to 2015, like.
Yeah, when the
Well, not
controlled
even
op
that.
narrative was the main thing coming out. Yeah. Back in 2015, when I first came to this subject, I was already... It was like coming through a dinner queue. Here's your tray. Here's your model. Here's your equivalent of gravity. Here's your controlled op narrative. There you go. Now go and eat. Right? And don't be surprised when you hold up any of these things if people have already got arguments figured out to make you look stupid with them. Next. Here's your model. Here's your gravity. Here it all is. Slop, slop, slop. Yeah, they did divvy that out nice, didn't they? Gave us distances to the sun, gave us models, gave us all sorts of things that we wouldn't ascribe to now, which is things like domes.
Yeah,
Well-
3,000 miles away. That's what I heard. It was it was smaller and local, 3,000 miles away.
what I was going to say is, just before you were saying it there, that that calculation of a 3,000 or 4,000 mile away sun was done by bowlers originally, and flat earthers just grabbed onto it. They just handed us a big straw man. That's what happened.
Correct.
Back when we didn't know what debating was.
Spot on. Yeah, exactly correct. So they do the exact same triangulation and then insert R and say, look, it matches up with our assumed distance. You go, oh, right. When you triangulate and then insert R. So you just assume that the surface is curved, pushing the distance out massively. But if you don't do that, if you don't insert the presuppositional R value, you end up with 4,000 kilometres high on an apparent item that we don't know what it is and is moving and moves as you move towards it, etc., etc.
Well, what they do is they do a 45-degree from both sides, angle from both sides of. I think this is how they do it. 45 degree. It doesn't really matter how they do it, because if you use an angle as a height measurement for the sun, then does that mean the sun is less high and more high at different times of the day? Do you know what I mean? Because as soon as your angle changes, your distance changes. You know, the angle can only give you a GP. It can't give you a height to any of these things. God knows what height they are, what they are.
You'd have to exactly. You haven't got enough to do that. You'd need to know the size of it or the distance to it first, to then be able to give you the other one if you didn't have it. But we haven't got either, so it's just a guessing game. Now, does that mean that you can't triangulate with it? No, it definitely still works, but it just doesn't mean you can extrapolate out the height from it. It's not reasonable. People do.
Yeah, well, I mean, the further away from you its GP is, the lower it is to the ground in that belief. You're not going to way, and the closer it is to, or its GP is to you, the higher it is if you go by using angles. Angles are for, you can use them for distance like that with the stars, or you can use them for angular size measurements. That's it. You can't use angles for actual heights.
Right.
Of objects you don't know, of unknown objects.
Exactly. If you've only got its apparent size, then it's basically in vain. As I say, it doesn't stop people asserting it. It doesn't mean that it was intentionally given to flat earthers so that when they assert it, on their model that's been prepackaged on the dinner queue, slopped into their trays and then forced down their throats without even thinking about it. At that point, when they insert R, you've just got a false dichotomy fallacy to argue about. Which one's right? Well, neither are right. But if you're already arguing that you can triangulate the position and they automatically beg the question of a sphere, it's win-win for the glober. A lot of the arguments that you will find yourself battling against as a flat earther are stereotyping fallacies. QE beautifully summed this up the other day. You know, it has a habit of doing it. Every argument starts with R. That's QE. You know, I originally thought that was actually Validation Boy, and then after about a year of giving him credit for it, QE said, yeah, that was me that gave him that. Nevertheless, you know, he has a way of summarising these things in terms of what's required, in this case R. But in terms of the argument structure, starts with a stereotyping fallacy in almost every instance. Flat earthers think this: I'm going to debunk that which you, because I'm saying you are a flat earther, because in name only, therefore you ascribe to everything that everyone who says that they're also a flat earther ascribes to. That's just how it's going to be, because my argument's structured around debunking a stereotyping fallacy. So you say dome, you say 4,000 kilometre sun. Yeah, so I'm going to debunk those things, says the glober or anti-flat earther. Any scientific evidence of gravity? I'll go on, put some more on that, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say at the end is that the whole pre-assumption of height using angles, well, as I said earlier, was done by ballers first, and then they handed it to us. You see, on your flat Earth model, this is what the height of the sun would be. Do you know what I mean? That's what we got. So there you go. There's your 4,000 miles or whatever rubbish. Do you know what I mean? But this is when flat earthers thought that there was a conversation to be had with the opposition. They didn't realise that the opposition were straight from word go out to absolutely destroy us.
Yeah, the assumption that people are open-minded and want to be demonstrated incorrect and haven't got such a high degree of pride that they're going to reject it out of hand and have been pre-primed to ridicule beyond what is normally socially acceptable, which I find quite fascinating. But there we go. There's all sorts of other things happening in more current media that are more overt than that. So maybe I won't focus on it too much, but I will focus on Retro Bill's question, and I'll put it to the panel. Pop quiz. Can anyone on the panel please disprove the idea of a downward vector in 2 words or less? Thank you very much for the super chat, by the way, Retro Bill. I'm sure you heard me stuttering and stammering around asking for PayPal donations yesterday, because it has actually been a really tough month, but nobody likes to admit that when you're e-begging and asking people to hit the PayPal link. So thank you very much for the super chat, Retro Bill. I really do appreciate it.
Relative density.
I think of another one now. Gas behaviour. There you go.
There you go. That's not bad. Gas behaviour. Anyone else want to have a bash at that?
Helium balloon.
I can almost do it in 2. I'd have to put an apostrophe. Vectors relative.
About my arse.
That doesn't really debunk the downward vector in 2 words.
I just felt it was an appropriate response to anyone claiming a downward vector.
You, as in what is produced by your arse. This is getting pretty rude.
No, as in, no, you are joking, aren't you? A downward vector, my arse, as in, I'm a farmer, questioning it. That would be my response. It's
ding ding.
It's a reversal again, isn't it? It's a reversal of the proof. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I just gave gas behaviour as an example. For what? To disprove something that you can't claim prove in the first place, that there's a downward vector. So it's.
No, I totally appreciate it, but he's giving me money. I'm not going to point out that.
Yeah. A tricky question, that. Really good question. Maybe a few more. Can we have a few more?
I'll do it, though, because it seems like I'm being rude to him behind the scenes. So it's the positive assertion that there is a downward vector. So in reality, Retro Bill, it's down to the person making the positive assertion to actually prove their claim. Now, we can debunk it after the assertion's made, but, you know, the positive assertion's on them. So by inference, when you say, how do you debunk it? It's like, well, it hasn't been proven and it's their claim. Nevertheless, we can still offer up that information, and I think helium balloon or gas behaviour or there's a whole bunch of them. So I'll just read out Retro Bill's chat though. He goes, ding, ding, ding. All right, answer earns you $10. Well, thank you very much, Retro Bill. I really appreciate it. Also, J Mel's24, hope I've said that correct, says, keep the lights on and the show running. Indeed. Yes, indeedy. Thank you very much indeed, both of you, for your super chats. Really do appreciate it. So, any scientific evidence of gravity? Don't all go at once?
No, because that would involve, well, I don't really know what that would involve because gravity's description continually changes. So, no.
I would like to kind of expand on this subject a little bit today on account of the fact that over the last couple of days, I did get a little bit of sticking comments, which I always like. That might sound strange. I'll qualify that before I go on. So, if you're over the target, you get flack, right? So when people are critical of something I've said, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'll focus on that a little bit more. But in terms of my explanation that we have got a quantum realm scientifically validated, and that completely debunks Einstein, which completely debunks Newton. Well, given that that's the case, would it not suggest that the consensus science, also experimentally valid when you talk about certain aspects of quantum mechanics, is the new now? It's the new hotness, whether we like it or not. Therefore, there's no room for heliocentrism in that paradigm. It kind of must fade out from here on in. It kind of, you can't keep propping up something that's been experimentally debunked, and that experimental debunking is part of mainstream scientific consensus. What do you think? I know we've talked about it over the last couple of days, but I want to focus on it a bit more because it alludes to the understanding that this is going to happen, and therefore they're letting us do what we're doing. That's why I'm not being penalised as a YouTuber, and I can actually make a living, albeit a bit of a crap one this month.
No, I have to agree. I mean, it's as you always say, hey, don't look at that thing over there that we're censoring. We're going to censor the hell out of this thing we keep on promoting. Do you know what I mean? It kind of says a lot, don't it?
Well, it hasn't made sense for the most part throughout the time on YouTube doing Flat Earth. None of it really made much sense to me. But it just takes time for you to get through some of the lies about experimental science. You know, until QE dropped on the scene and started to explain how they'd utilise these magic words of science when they weren't actually using the method. If that stage hadn't come, I wouldn't be able to casually ponder my way through the idea that the mainstream consensus science still is experimentally led. That is the direction that the world has gone. And, you know, it's not going to be the case that people come along and, other than the heliocentrists like Tyson, who are going to, you know, potentially say, well, that's not quite right. Well, it's like, yeah, you'll say that because it's debunking your worldview, but it is experimentally valid, unlike your pseudoscience. So, unfortunately, deGrasse Tyson becomes a dinosaur fighting to stay alive.
Well, I reckon that he's going to move with the times. That's what I reckon he'll get. You know, he'll just throw his hand in the air and go, we were wrong. Science can be wrong about stuff. And then, you know, tell a joke. Everything's happy.
Show the waistcoat.
Yeah.
The other thing that got me a bit of grief in comments, I'll ask the question first. Any evidence you can have gas pressure without a container?
There is no evidence whatsoever in the history of that.
What we don't often talk about on this show is the ISS. And the reason we don't often talk about it is because you can't have gas pressure without a container, and the footage claimed to come from outer space in a sky vacuum is automatically fake. It's also very easy to see through the cinematography and stage techniques used to produce the internal footage from places like the ISS. If you've got any sort of cinematography background, you should spot it. I'll segue slightly here. any of you guys watch or are subscribed to Rob Ager?
No, but I've heard you speak of him.
Rob Ager's a film critic, and a very good one in my opinion. Breaks down a lot of not just Stanley Kubrick movies, but the ones I like most, because I like Stanley Kubrick, are his breakdowns of those movies, including 2001. And I'd really love to see someone like him, who's definitely not a flat earther, breaking down the old moon landing footage. It's just a propaganda film. Now, I hope you'll all agree with me on this, because I don't really have that much trouble convincing people that the moon landing was faked anymore in 2020. I did in 2015, I assure you. I got a lot of crap from family and friends when I brought the subject up. Now it's almost taken as read. So, given that that's the case, it'd be really nice to see someone like Rob Ager pulling apart old NASA footage as a movie, rather than as you know, a propaganda piece pretending to be real. Even if he did pull it apart as propaganda, I'd just be fascinated to see that. Anyway, that was an aside note to my actual point, which was when we talked about the ISS, I got a lot of flack for saying that we don't know what it is, and the stage show in a sky vacuum, as I've said already, is completely fake and bunk from the offset, so you don't have to debunk it in that regard. But what you're left with is just a light in the sky that moves across the sky. Why would we automatically assume it's a man-made whatever? It just could be another light in the sky that just doesn't behave in the same way as the other lights behave. Now, when there's an anomaly with things like, retrograde motion, that's like, well, we've got a semi-coherent explanation for it, and maybe the model will subtly change or whatever when it's changed from geocentric to heliocentric with these sorts of anomalies. But with the ISS, I think it was just a step too far to explain, because that is what it is. It's a light in the sky, and as optics have got better, they've improved what they claim it is, tin can in the sky. But I don't see us having any reason to automatically assume this thing's been put up there by us. But that, like I say, seemed to me like the level of flack I got for it meant that maybe I'm over the target with something with that. You know, like I say, we don't often talk about the ISS. Any further comments on that? Any more thoughts?
Are you just talking about it as a light in the sky that may not be man-made, or are you looking to talk about the internals of the ISS?
The internals of the ISS, they're already bunk. It's stage show, high wires and all, on film sets and green screens. That goes without question. We don't need to discuss that. The internal shots are claimed to be internal to a tin can in a sky vacuum. So before I even get into the stage and cinematography aspects of it, which is what most people focus on, I can say the area that it's claimed to be in is a fake place. It's like saying, well, let's take apart the mechanics of the internal shots when the place that they're supposed to be is Narnia. I don't need to do any of that. It's supposed to be in Narnia. Hello, we haven't got Narnia, so it doesn't matter what they say the mechanics of the sledge are. It's in Narnia. So it's in space. Space is fake, so I don't need to go through the internal shots. But we are still left with the light in the sky, Brian. Now, you started off by saying, are you suggesting that it's not man-made? Like, why are you automatically assuming it is man-made, just because the ISS is claimed to be?
No, I was just asking the question of what direction are we taking the conversation? That's all. I wasn't accusing you of suggesting anything. I know you're just bringing up the question.
So, all I'm saying is, without any prior information, you go out one day and go, oh, look at that light. And it's gone. And that's it. That's what you've got to go on.
Well, if it was man-made, what would it prove as far as the nature of the debate we're having about the Earth?
Absolutely nothing. It's only claimed to prove things because it's claimed to be in a sky vacuum, heliocentric model included, in an orbit, heliocentric model included, and taking pictures of a sphere Earth, heliocentric model included. All three are bunk. All three are debunked by the second law of thermodynamics, none of which are ever covered on this show, very rarely, unless an opponent who also, if they are a fan of the show, won't bring up, because they'll know how quickly the argument dies.
Well, I just wanted to point that out before we got into conjecture about it, because it's not really proven anything.
No, if you proved it was, as Brian suggested last time we discussed this, a balloon in a jet stream, okay, That's nice. Proving what now? Nothing. You don't need to disprove what it is if it is man-made and give an alternative explanation when it's claimed to be in a sky vacuum. And yeah, I'm glad we've disposed of that. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry to cut you off.
Well, going on the pre-assumption that it isn't man-made as a speculation, let's just say, right? Maybe it's some kind of is it a watcher of us or something? You know, the place is created. If this place is created, then whatever that is, could it be watching us for some reason or monitoring something? I don't know.
I know.
Is it?
It's God's cap.
Come on, Adam.
It's Aslan. He's waiting for the right time to introduce his wardrobe-based transport system because he keeps checking on us periodically, so that's what you see go over.
You're a smidge quiet, by the way, Adam. Shout out to Michael Kahn, who says, God bless Nathan and all on the panel. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Really appreciate your support, Michael, who's also one of my patrons.
There was a serious bit to that. So we're back again, aren't we? Trying to think, not justify anything for it, but trying to use our imagination, which likes to be used to conjure up a methodology with the known stuff we do know of how we could fake it for them.
Yeah,
kind of indicative of the level of their argument, unfortunately, for them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's structured in the same old way, exactly, Adam. Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics? Tap, tap, tap. This thing on. Any evidence? No? Astrophysics? Anybody hear me? What's going on?
No, sorry, I was away from the phone. Sorry, no.
No, all they got is an observance of something, but nothing more than that.
Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Well, you're going to need R for that, and after all the R's you didn't have for all the previous questions about a sphere, no.
Well, that concludes the housekeeping. I like that 40-minute housekeeping session. Another one of my patrons smashing the super chat. Let's just bring this up on screen before I read it out. Bear with me 1 second. Shout out to Ben White. The so-called ISS does look similar to the claimed object. You can actually see the shape when zoomed in from here on the ground using a P900. Yeah, agreed. Last time we discussed it, Ben, I actually suggested, again, this got me stick, but for a different reason, that people go and check out Red Rhetoric's footage, which is excellent. And it does resemble what they claim it is, based on what the shape is in the submerged pool that they've got. You know, when they've got that layout of actual tin cans in water, that's what it will resemble when you take a picture of it. Now, I'm saying that over the years, they've progressively changed the story about what's up there, how it's got up there, and we know for a fact that it is all lies. They're not sending anything up there because up there doesn't exist. It's Narnia. Therefore, what have we actually got? Well, we've got the fact that they have lied continually about tin cans floating in orbit. Now, I would suggest that over the years, as optics have improved, people have got a better look at what that shape is. That blurry shape that vaguely resembles what they claim is a tin can here in a pool. And likewise, like I say, as the optics have improved, they've said, oh, that one's going to crash land and we'll have to put another one up that's a little bit more elaborate. So another shout out to Michael Kahn, who says, the ISS is a controversy for the supernatural light we see, the angel of the bottomless pit. I don't really follow that, Michael Kahn, but thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Really appreciate your support. Also, 2222, ISS, yes, you can see something up there, and how far away is it? What does it prove? Spot on, 2222. Thank you very much indeed also for the super chat. And also Mike808. Partial payment. tuition fee. Thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate the support. And indeed to 2222 and Michael Kahn. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for your super chats. Really do appreciate it.
Well, let's see if we can generate some more super chats. Can you go to Master B and put up the slide? Brian and I were going over this in the after show yesterday. And then Brian, I'm going to have you do this, all right?
The after show, I believe is called the Ever After Show.
That's right.
Okie dokie. Right, you're on screen.
Yeah, all right, Brian, you got it?
Not yet. Actually, you should probably do it when I try and join in, because there's a lot of kind of activity going on around me at the moment, so there'll be background noise.
All right, no problem.
I'll help you when I can. Okay.
Kiwi came on and talked about why did they do another zenith over the observer. And so here's a slide in my research of the sextant. And here you can see they're trying to show a curve, and yet they got that gray or so shaded circle of equal altitude. And they're saying it's a 90 degree from the star to the observer, which would be the red. And of course, the blue is the GP of the star. Well, this again fails to support their model, because if that distance from the GP of the star to you is a right angle, then that radius has to be straight. And that's why they put 90 there. And that whole circle of equal altitude has to be flat as well. Now, the co-altitude is what you're trying to get with the sextant, because you're measuring, with your sextant, and it's 60 degrees. So you minus that from 90, so that's 30. And then you times that by 60 nautical miles, and that's 1,800 miles in nautical miles to the zenith of the star, the GP of the star. Now, what's cool about this slide is it answers, why do they have a zenith over your head? Well, number one, all zenith means is directly above you. So in this expression in this slide, they just decided to put it in there. And this brings to what Brian was saying yesterday, creates a box with two right angles. So it's there for the taking, but at the same time, it doesn't help them, if you know what I'm saying, because you can say, why do they point the sextant at the horizon to get the angle? Well, because you can't do it without it. You can't measure your own zenith. Where are you going to point it at? So what you do is you point it at the horizon, a flat, straight line, horizontal, and there's your baseline straight from you all the way to the GP of the star. And then you can backwards do it this way and say, oh, well, in that case, I could do a right angle directly above me. But the sextant works the first go-around way.
Just a quick shout out to Paula from the chat. She's just given us a quick comment. I'll just bring up the chat so you can read along. She says, thank you very much, Paula. Actually, zenith means the highest point an object in the sky will reach on a given day and location. Thank you very much. Also,
agree with all of that.
Shout out to Wandering Eyes 11, who says, what's that word? Obligated FEG tuition. No obligation, but I really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. And indeed, if you're smashing the PayPal link, again, thank you very much. I assume you want to remain anonymous if you're smashing the PayPal link to support me. Thank you very much if you have.
So I don't know if Brian wants to jump in, but I'd like Adam to comment on this if he'd like to.
Yeah, I was just holding. So as I look at that from a straight geometry point of view, it's fine on a flat plane, but if you look at what's being drawn and represented there, the bottom line horizon, one that goes from yellow through to orange, the one that defines the 90-degree angle from the observer to the GP up to the star, that 90 degrees cannot, from a geometric point of view in terms of what's been drawn in the picture, be 90 degrees. Because it's 90 degrees onto a curvy line, okay, which is an impossibility. I say that geometrically, that diagram's a mess. It doesn't add up because the 90-degree line can't be a 90-degree line because they're claiming that the line that takes you from the observer to the GP is curved based on a rate of r. It's a great circle route, which means that can't be 90 geometrically because it's just a mess mathematically. You're asking to forgive this, forgive that, ignore this, ignore that, and then you can use playing a trig. Well, you can't because you're trying to put it on a surface, and that corrupts your angles.
Maybe I can direct the next super chat towards Brian. It's about dip correction. So Al Junkie says, eating nachos, salsa is sour, need dip correction.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, good scoop on that one.
Very good. Good scoop.
Hey, I got some more slides to validate what Adam just said. Yeah, that slide is a mess.
Okay, I've got your next one with
on that slide
hold on one sec. I've got the next one up, which is how the sextant actually works, and I'll just preface it just to lead us back in as I've shouted out a couple of super chats and stuff. So Adam's last point was to say that this line, which is alluded to being curved, won't give you 90 degrees at this point and 90 degrees at this point. Now, it's a bit too far away for me to see, but correct me if I'm wrong, the one in the distance, the angle in the distance, has got a 90 degree marked on it. Am I wrong? On the last slide, the one before the one that you're about to talk about?
That.
But it can't be 90. If this is a curved line, this is not 90 degrees and this is not 90 degrees. And as Brian was saying yesterday, you're trying to form a box, the bottom baseline, giving you a zenith, and the star a GP to its zenith, both of which must have 90 degrees for this triangulation to take place. If this line is curved, you cannot achieve 90 degrees here, and you cannot achieve 90 degrees here. Therefore, this is bunk. It doesn't work this way. On to 10th Man's first slide, how the sextant actually works. Take it away, 10th Man.
Actually, let Brian finish on that slide, and I'll take it away after that. He wanted to say something.
On the slide before, Brian?
Yes.
Yeah, you don't even need to really show it again, Nathan. It's just those two zeniths, due to the surface being underneath them being curved, have to diverge. And that is the claim from our opposition. The zeniths are always divergent, and the claim comes from the zeniths meeting up at the center of a sphere. So there is 90 degrees is an absolute impossibility when you have divergent zeniths. So if they need 90 degrees, then there is no such thing as divergent zeniths.
Yeah, further affirming that you wouldn't get the 90 degrees, because if this line is bent, the zenith that meets it isn't meeting the surface at 90 degrees if it's on a bent surface. So these two, therefore, will not and cannot and aren't claimed to be parallel. But for triangulation, they must be, and are depicted here as being parallel, even with a little 90-degree box. But that simply isn't possible if this surface is curved. Any more to add on that, Brian, and then I'll move on to the next slide, if not?
No, that was everything. Thank you.
Okay, right, third time's a charm. How a sextant actually works. Over to you, 10th Man.
Yeah, so I made this slide. I've shared this in the past with Adam and Brian as well. And I mean, the sextant is a glorified protractor. Here, you don't have a curved baseline. It's going to actually work with this 90-degree box. So there's the sun. You can see the degrees of distance based on 3 different sailboats, just to give an idea of how it works on a flat plane. And then you got the box saying it's a 90 degree. So the GP of the sun is here. And for sailboat, you can see 60, 45, 30 degrees all the way to the last one. You need that 0 baseline or 180, so to speak, that a protractor gives you. And that's how you get an angle. You need a vertex. Now, if you go to the next slide, I took liberty to do how this other slide that they messed up. See, sextant can never work on a curve, like Adam said. How the sextant cannot work is the title of this slide. So now you got the same sun, same GP, same 90 degrees, as they say, it's a right angle, and yet the sailboat on the curve would be well below that plane that you need to achieve an angle. So if they show it this way, it's embarrassing, it doesn't work. And there was a previous picture from actual navigation site that shows a right angle sitting on top of the globe. It's as embarrassing as this one. Now, the next slide would show what a protractor is. And you can see it needs that 180 or 0 baseline. And then you've got the degrees there. Very similar. In fact, people have a homemade sextant by putting a straw, like a sipping straw. They tape it to that bottom baseline, and they tie a string with a weight, and they have a homemade sextant. And they just turn it upside down and look through the straw to get angles and so forth. But let's go to the diagrams. What do you notice in the first diagram what 0 is? Well, it's just a straight line. And then to get 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60, 90, 110, 135, 180, 210. What do they all have in common is that base line, that straight line that you need to get a vertex. And obviously the vertex here is where the two lines meet. If you go to finish out the section on what angles are, it goes to 270, 315, and 360. So what do you need? A baseline. It needs to be flat all the way to the GP of the star or sun. And that's how you get an angle. And that's how a sextant works.
Perfect. This has been a really good show. So a decent amount of time on each of the housekeeping questions, along with a very concise explanation for how we can debunk the Earth as a sphere by way of utilisation of a sextant, which is an angle measuring device, and that angle measuring device's requirement for a flat baseline, something that is impossible to achieve on a sphere. So back to 10th Man's how a sextant cannot work. The baseline is what you require. That's what gives you 180 degrees to work from, to give you a vertex, to get an angle, to whatever you're triangulating with. In other words, the sextant is utilising a property of the surface of the ground in order to figure out where you are. And that property that it's utilising is a plane, a flat, level surface. That's what it's doing.
Yeah, and guess what the last instructions are for a navigator as he's plotting his position once he's used a sextant? I'm sending it over right now. This is off of a plotting sheet. As you can see at the very bottom, it says note, lines of position or the Sumner lines are always at right angles to the bearing or the azimuth of the celestial body. How can you do that right angle over a curve?
You can't.
Impossible. That's why it's the year of the sextant, 2021.
Could I ask to go to? I've just put a slide in, Master B, Nathan. It's one of 10 I've just scribbled on.
It's on.
So this is just the point I'm making there. You see, when you've got a straight line, that square that designates the right angle, we only draw a little square in the corner. It doesn't matter. You could draw that square wherever. The angle is the same. However, as we progress along this surface, you can see, look, if I go a little bit away.
Sorry, which slide am I on? Sorry.
So the last one, so it looks like tense, but I've put some red squiggles on it.
Oh, yes, I think I've got the right one now. Yes, how the sextant cannot work, but with extra squiggles, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're on now. Sorry.
If we go to the point where it says 95, so if we go to that point on the surface, you can see that the angle is no longer 90. It's going to be about 95 degrees. We go across as we travel further and further to the observer's point. Look, 100 degrees, 110 degrees is the reality of. So there isn't one angle along that straight line. You see, every different position. So by the time you get to the supposed position of the observer, you're looking at 120 degrees. Sorry.
Or to put it another way, it doesn't work on a curved surface, and it's going against the geometric properties that it's employing. That would be a straight baseline and a vertex with two straight lines. You can't do that on a curved surface. It does not work.
Not a triangle. Fundamentally, the geometry isn't representing a triangle. Therefore, you can't use the rules of internal angles of triangles to calculate anything or draw any inference from.
Anybody got any last comments on this?
Adam is way smart.
Yeah, this last image makes it pretty clear. It like puts away that slicing to the earth thing. It can't be slicing to the earth because then otherwise you're not looking straight up at the sun or whatever you call it, the zenith or something.
Yeah.
Right? Right. So, yeah, thanks, Adam. And 10th. And yeah, you too, Neil. Why not?
Anyone else got any comments? Because there is one last super chat shout out. It's been a cracking show. I agree. Retro Bill says great show today. Yeah, I totally agree. Please share the show, as this has been a very, very educational show today, which is great.
Oh, I'd say just before you move on. Sorry, then.
Go on, Brian.
No, go ahead.
You can have the last word.
Well, I think there's something else he wants to show, Nathan, so I don't know if I want to take his thunder.
Who, what, sorry?
Well, I just listed another couple of slides there to validate what's been validated. One is a screen capture of a Navy site. It's a black and white one you could see, showing exactly what my slide shows, that you need a straight baseline that's 90 degrees, and that's how you get an angle, just like Adam just showed with the squiggly line. So that might go a long way when you could show that picture from a Navy site.
Yeah, I've got that up.
Pretty simple. Yeah, I mean, it's right there in front for everyone to see, right? So it's like, there's the boat, the navigator, or the ship in this case, and the GP of the sun is way off in the distance. You see a flat horizon line. You don't see any curvature here. You see an angle. You see a 90 degree. This is how Sextant works. It's a glorified protractor. And then the last slide, which is one of my favorites, is showing if the circle of equal altitude in 3 different ways as they cross each other for a fix. But from the last paragraph, we get some kernel of truths here. And it says, from this, a navigator knows he is on a specific circle along the plane. Notice the wording, the plane of the surface of Earth, of radius r, known as the line of position, LOP. He does not know his direction from this point. However, by examining a second star, a second radius can be deduced. The navigator now knows he's at one of the points where both the circular functions meet. In the case that there is only one real route, he knows his position. Although this is only possible, and here it comes, if the radii are parallel. It's over. I mean, this is that they give crummy drawings, as Adam and Brian showed, and then they show the good pictures like the Navy one, and then they break it down like here, all flat, all 90 degrees, and saying you need a radius from the GP of 3 stars to be parallel to each other, flat, ball game over.
Can only work on a flat plane. It's utilizing a geometric aspect of flatness to work. Cannot work on a spherical surface because you don't achieve parallel lines from the GP to each star, and you can't acquire 90 degrees to the surface if it's curved. This only works on a flat plane and thoroughly debunks the globe. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared. This has been a really good show today. Subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley channel member, and all that good stuff. Also, massive thanks to all of you who hit the PayPal link while the show was live. It really is appreciated. Although I stumbled over my words yesterday, it has indeed been a difficult month, so thank you very much for all of your support. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
what a lovely day!
I have.
Yeah, you probably got rewarded with your good answer yesterday. So that's probably why you got paid.
What?
Hey, Arwen,
Paid
nice
for
job.
not having a show, you mean?
I missed
Hey,
the
by
beginning
the
of
way,
that.
Neil, did you get my video? I sent you some on Skype. Thought you would appreciate it.
I did not, but I'll look.
Oh God, is he going to ask me if I've seen it next? Quick, let's go somewhere else.
Yeah, but how many times has it been over? It's over.
We got somebody that
There was
wants to
someone from
talk to Tenth
Discord.
from Discord.
Who? What's the name?
Bob?
Feel free, Bob.
Bob, you
Hey,
there?
Nathan.
Hello.
Staying healthy out there, my friend?
Yeah.
Is 10th around?
He is.
I'm also vertical.
Boom, boom.
Cool. Hey, 10th, I'm doing a show on the Sextant on Thursday, and I'm going to be taping it sometime today or tomorrow. I just wanted to invite you to come join me if you'd like.
No, I think I'll pass, Bob. You're a fallacy guy.
Fair enough. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anything new in it? You gone?
Got all the information right here.
He left.
Yeah, you left.
Yeah, that's a shame. Obviously nothing new, or he would have told us.
Yeah, he's trying to bring Tent in there to try to bring him to his corner of the arena. Not happening, buddy.
Well, there's also some new concavers around, or it might just be Jason McCormack again with another show.
I think it's all one guy. It's all just Jason McCormack.
Yeah, those concavers need a radius too, so they're out of the debate too.
No,
Yeah,
they
I
just
like-
use circumdicular geometry, but inside out. It's that bad.
I really enjoy that. Pummeling the concavers with the exact same stick that we pummel the heliocentrists with. I really enjoy doing that. Nick did it the other day. I even did it in an advert. Asked basically where'd you get your measurements. Might as well be where'd you get R. It's the same exact same thing. And the guy's like, I don't have any. Don't actually have any tangible measurements of that. You're like, game over then, my friend. Well done, Nick. Phuket word. Check him out.
Yeah, well, there was a troll, well, not really a troll, it's a funny sharing his pain in chat today that I noticed. We said, oh, flat earth and the ball is a false dichotomy. Where's your proof of flat? It's
Sextant.
like, that sounds very familiar.
Sextant. I'm more than happy to say that now. Sextant. There you
Sextant,
go.
I agree.
Right, well, he was there ignoring it, just like ballers do.
There's plenty of
I
flat
gotta
earth.
admit, I'm a little curious though what Bob's got to say.
Okay, I'm sure that's probably why he came to invite somebody to get some publicity after we discuss him being here. So, you know, from a psychological point of view, job well done. Props to you, Bob. Good move. A very good move, disappearing immediately as well. Probably the best move you've made so far in my presence.
Yeah, if I was on the other side of this, I'd want to drag someone off to where I have authority to silence them when I need to. You know, when the point's going to be destructive to my entire paradigm, it'd be real helpful if I could shut them up.
Right, horror value, thanks, Bob. Go and spam that in chat.
Anyway, he's not here, so enough about Bob. Not getting any more publicity out of me.
Go back to making fun of concave earthers. That was pretty fun.
Right, well, if you want to make fun of them, just call them inside-out ballers. That emphasizes the issue.
Are you saying they're ballers with their brains beat out or something?
No, I don't think they are. I honestly wouldn't. I wouldn't tar them with that brush. So whereas we've got a brush of anti-flat earthers when it comes to heliocentrists that have gone rogue and start debunking their own model because we've debunked it, the concavers don't tend to behave like that. In personality type on troll levels, even their trolling. So Jason McCormack's a good example. There's a certain amount of light-heartedness to his trolling. That isn't sort of vicious and vindictive like the heliocentrists are. So no, I don't see the concavers. Earlier we were talking about, well, I thought, I can't remember who said it now, but somebody said I thought we'd just have a reasonable discussion about this instead of us attacking us with venom and vitriol. Well, when you have a conversation with a concaver, it is a little bit more like that. Now, don't get me wrong, they're going to get triggered as a fundy with a faith like anybody would, but they don't seem to be as vicious and vindictive and demeaning as the heliocentrists are. I don't know if anybody will agree with me, but that's certainly my experience with concavers.
Well, they seem a little less stressed out, but then again, I only really have Jason McCormack as an example because it always turns out to be him for some reason when I get to notice.
I've had plenty of interactions with varying different concavers, including LSC, over the years, and I would agree they're just that little bit less in cognitive pain than the heliocentrists are. So from that perspective, yeah, they do seem a little bit more chilled out for the most part. And also they're part of the ACT realm, the alternative conspiracy truth realm, if you want to label it like JLB does, which means that they're normally far more aware of a lot of the lies that are out there. In other words, just recognizing that they're not on a sphere as described. Yeah, they've put themselves inside it, but it's not as described, therefore they appreciate that that's what's on the media and that is how it's described, very much opposite to what they think. Therefore, simply by being that way, they're going to recognise a lot of other deceptions and are probably on a parallel path to us in many different ways. And that parallel path is not mirrored by the heliocentrists in any way, shape or form. So, yeah, that's my spin on it.
Well, I guess that the biggest
rebuttal.
I guess the biggest difference with concavers and heliocentrists is that the heliocentrists got this whole kind of vulnerable, filled-in mathematical model of all these other planets. Concavers don't have that, really. So they don't have as much heritage to lose in their mind if their religious defense fails them.
Sure, but if I took, say, a current... Please, God, don't spin this out into actually talking about it. A current 2020/2021 propaganda narrative that is in the mainstream. If I presented that propaganda narrative in the mainstream to a heliocentrist, they would defend the propaganda to their death. Now, if I presented the exact same thing in the exact same way to a concaver, I would almost expect the concaver to go, yeah, of course. Yeah, I know it's all bullshit. And not even bat an eyelid. So that would be the distinction, in my opinion. Concavers aren't siding with mainstream narratives. That's the difference, right? They've braced against it, even though they're not actually in line with reality and they can't prove they are our value, and there's a lot of issues with their model that they've adapted. But all that happened was when they got to the cafeteria, they happened to get there a little bit late and they'd run out of flat earth slop to put on the trays. And they went, what have we got left in the fridge? We've got this old concave slop. Do you want that? Yes, please. Gobble, gobble, gobble. But while they were gobbling it, they went, this is kind of rancid. I'll look around at what else is nasty about the place. But, I'm eating my concave soup now, so what are you going to do?
Do they believe in a force of up? I don't really know anything about concavers, though, but do they believe in a force of up? Since ballers believe in the force of down, do they believe in the force of up?
I can vaguely remember LSC talking about it in terms of centrifugal forces, and it wouldn't actually have any issues in terms of their assertions of gravity. So most things are paralleled from heliocentrism, and if you've got a down, it's got an up in the concave world. But that's much easier to sort of fathom for them, and I'd agree. You know, if
No, it's not. Absolutely not.
like a graviton,
That only
a
works in
gravitron.
a disk world.
Hold on,
That only works in.
Hold on.
When it's actually a ring.
My God, I'll just say hold on 15 more times before I get to the end of my point. Like on a gravitron, right? You're forced to the outside edge of the thing that's spinning, and you don't have to cognitively process that. If you're being forced to the outside edge of something, and you're standing inside it, then no issue. They can reverse that with less issue than they can assert on the gravitational model, with you sticking to the outside edge of a ball with a force that's not a force that you can think of as a force that's bending pseudo-Riemannian force space-time. All those sorts of things are there because it's a band-aid. For the concavers, at the very least, they go, yeah, okay, you've just got a centrifugal force.
Yeah, but that doesn't actually work at all, because
Didn't
that
say it
only
did.
works if...
Didn't say it did. I'm not arguing. I'm not bloody concaver. I'm not arguing they're right.
No, but it's just that, yes, it's easier to imagine centrifugal force, but when you then realize that you're supposedly on the hollow globe inside of it, then there would be dramatic difference in experience of gravity at the equator versus at the North and South Pole. Like it would be, there would be no gravity there at all, right?
Yeah, the top.
If you want to see an example of what that's kind of like, watch Babylon 5. That's a hollow station that is spinning, and they show the mechanical dilemmas of what can happen. Like you can get stuck floating on the inside. It just doesn't work if it's a hollow globe.
Yeah, I agree.
Still need an R for that.
Exactly. They'll still need an R for it.
That too, yeah.
It's never going to happen. But just back to the original point, I don't see concavers as being completely deluded mainstream sheep. Obviously they're not. They've got a completely different model to the mainstream. So, no, I don't agree in any respect to their nonsense model. But they're halfway there, just in terms of their disposition to societal-based nonsense.
Right. The concavers they still have a centralized Earth. They are geocentric per default, and they don't conjure up other places that are supposedly much bigger to which you supposedly could go. They don't have any issues with that. They don't have a conjured up realm in which the actual Earth that they're standing on is just this insignificant little part. That's the big difference.
Yeah, it's a completely different philosophy from once you invert the heliocentric model and have everything on the inside. It's so fundamentally different to what's claimed in the mainstream that in order to accept that model, right or wrong, you've got to brace against the mainstream. So if they're bracing against the mainstream, well then high five with you, my friend, because presumably you've seen through a lot of other deception, even though you've picked and ascribed to a model that's just another model. Yeah, you fall into that bear trap. But that doesn't mean that you haven't spotted all the other ones along the way, or at least are looking out for them. If you're claiming to be debunking flat Earth, that means you're still looking out to debunk things that you don't think are right. Well, good for you. At least you're showing some sort of critical thought. Contrary to any heliocentrist anti-flat earther who just wants to buy into everything they're told on TV. TV is the devil, and the new version of TV is Facebook, an algorithm that controls the distribution of information that has come from what you will consider to be a credible source because you know them personally. The fact that they've put out 30 or 40 posts that day and none of them reached you, but the one that met the algorithm standards in terms of whatever media narrative was being spun at the time did make it through to you, you will see it as credible. Well, it was Joe down the street that said it. How can it not be true? It's like, well, it's being punted in a way that makes you recognise the credibility of somebody down the street, even though what they're putting out for the most part will never reach you. Only select parts of it. Well, that's addressing an issue that people have with the detachment or their alienation from the media. the newscaster isn't enough for you to familiarise yourself with, even if they look similar to you or you like the look of them because they're handsome or pretty. That doesn't help you in terms of your relation to them and your believing what they're telling you when they present a little play and a little story on a newsreel. But if it's come from down the road, if it's come from somebody you've went to school with 20 years ago, then you're far more likely to accept that narrative. Now, all it means, they've got to find narratives from people within this chain that can be fed along certain channels. You become the broadcaster, you become the reporter, so you become credible. So every single person putting out a news story that happens to align with whatever the mainstream's putting out that day, they're all for primary research and going back and checking everything that they've put out there when they've just filmed something and talked next to it or written next to it what they thought at the time. You know, that's perfect in terms of what the actual news on TV from years gone by used to do. You know, the newscaster hasn't got the slightest clue what they're reading or saying. Well, if you've got somebody that just makes up a story on the spot, which is most people when they've got a camera phone and they're, wow, I'm on Facebook talking to the world, that, if it happens to align with a narrative that's been put out, can easily be distributed here, there and everywhere and be deemed as credible just because it's some name that you're already associated with for whatever reason. Just reduces
Did you see what happened to Joe Rogan?
I'm just saying it reduces the degrees of separation between the person that's giving you your news and the news itself. Therefore, the credibility, perceived credibility, goes up in the mind's eye of the person that's looking at that data on Facebook because it's come from what they perceive to be a far more credible source because there's less degrees of separation. The controlled methods and roads and routes that information is distributed along and controlled by, it is never considered by the person who gets that information. It's easier to consider that if there's far more degrees of separation between you and the reporter on a TV. So it's just the new, more complex hotness in terms of propaganda distribution. But hardly any of you normal, general public normie is going to recognise that. And if you postulate it to them, especially if they're an anti-flat earther, they'd brace against it. Tell you how stupid you are. How can you possibly disagree with a piece of news that's come from your own friend? Etc.
Not really. Did you hear what happened with Joe Rogan? Did you see his latest thing?
No.
He was, I don't know if I could talk about it because it has to do with, you know what? They accused him of taking horse medication when he got
Sorry,
the.
Are they accusing him of taking
yeah.
steroids?
No.
It was some sort of horse medication, but it wasn't.
It
and
was.
he got the guy.
Oh, hold on. Just let Adam, because Adam will know which lines to skirt. Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Adam. Take my glory.
All yours, Neil.
Go on then.
I'm only kidding.
Don't get me.
Go ahead.
What the issue was is that a gentleman became ill and was prescribed some medicine that is for human use, has had massive uses across the globe as a anti-parasitic drug in countries. Really, millions and millions of hours of patient experience and doses taken. So a well tried and tested human drug. Now this drug is also put into horse wormers for the same thing, anti-parasitic. But when the mainstream media were reporting this, they constantly placed it in the category of taking horse wormers, which was factually incorrect. The same drug is used in horse wormers, but the implication was that this gentleman was taking horse wormers to treat his illness, as opposed to the reality that it was a prescribed human medication.
When you say horse wormers, as in like
Dewormer.
worming tablets.
Yes.
Yes.
Horse
But the funny
dewormer.
thing is, if I may, for a second, like if you Google that, horse dewormer, it's uncanny. The first thing that pops up is exactly what we're talking about, right? You don't have to say the name. You can just say that, and it works really well, ironically.
Yeah, but the thing is, he got that guy on his show, and he told him, "You should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah.
Doesn't it bother you that your news station is telling an outright lie?"
Well, he got him. He got. I think it was Dr.
The little
Sanjay Gupta.
Yes, that's him.
Is the guy who's the chief medical, and he did get him to the point where he said, yes, it was incorrect of them and misleading. But they've then gone on a backtracking mission trying to use what they said and justify it that they weren't being snide, which they were. It was quite clear what the implications were. The implications were, first of all, fundamentally that this was off license. This thing wasn't used in humans. There was the implication that he was actually going and down the veterinary centre and getting horse dewormer.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. So they're implying he's doing it illegally. Well, that's a bloody outrage. He should be fuming.
And taking horse dewormer. He isn't. He's taking human-made medicine in tablet form. The same drug, ivermectin, is available in as a human form, like say for treatment of parasitic infections, and has been for many, many years. So it's a widely prescribed human drug. But the way in which it was reported was he is taking a veterinary medicine.
And it was prescribed to him.
It's not experimental at all. It's very well tested and it's extremely reliable. That's the whole amazing thing.
Okay, so I've just given an example of how media reaches people. Okay, right. Anybody who's done or who's just spoken on this subject, how much primary source research have you done to verify? For instance, Neil, you said he was prescribed it. How did you verify that, Neil?
Well, I can only go by what he says.
That's not what I asked.
What do you mean?
What do I mean when I say, what primary source research have you done to verify what you have just stated and now becomes news? For example,
I watched his video.
Yeah, you told me that. I know what you've said. Can you sense my slightly annoyed tone, Neil? Can you sense that?
Yeah, I get.
Can you let me explain it?
Can you understand mine?
No.
Okay, good. Then you go first.
Okay. Right. So, based on hearsay alone, this is a broadcast show. So this will reach people. Now, let's say it reaches my next door neighbour, just for the sake of argument, just to parallel it with the example I just gave in Facebook. Yeah? This becomes news. So my neighbour knows me, and on my show, we're talking about how he was prescribed a certain piece of information. All of this for just to keep me out of the danger zone of YouTube. All of this is purely speculation and for example only. Not making any allegations, not making any claims, or trying to disprove them in this regard. Merely an example. So, you say somebody has acquired a prescription because they said so. Okay. How have you validated that to be the case to make it statable as newsworthy information that could be repeated ad nausea to vindicate somebody that could potentially be exactly as described in the antithesis that he's moaning about currently? How have you verified that?
Okay, once again, I'll say the doctor was on his show. He held up his prescription and said it's prescribed to me. And the doctor did not refute it.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's pretty cast iron. Bad example now, isn't it? Well, that pisses all over my bonfire if he held up the fucking prescription. Wish I'd known that before I used this as an example. Okay, I'll shut up.
It was a bad one. It was very... It wasn't just this one thing. I think his words are, we've hit it with everything. So he gives a bit of testimony as he's sharing his experience over a few days, Joe Rogan, as he does this. And it's one of the things he tries. So I don't think there's any question. He's talking about all the things the doctor's authorizing and he's going to try it and he's on board with all of these things. This is testimony of a day. So I was quite confident. And he's quite vociferous with it. You know, this is a prescribed medical treatment by a prescribed medical practitioner. That's part of the, again, the misrepresentation that I think the mainstream did as well there. It was like he was just
I'll post the video
to the vets to go and get it.
Perfect.
Which wasn't the case.
I'm glad you've clarified it because that keeps me out of any danger zone. Perfect. But in the hypothetical example where he didn't hold up a prescription and just said those words, look, this was prescribed, it was medical, blah, 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 gave all the excuses and just said those words, and then it was repeated by Neil. That's the example I'm giving in terms of the Facebook distribution of propaganda and false information. Just because you've heard it and you repeat it, it seems more valid. especially if you're filming something and then postulating the cause of, I don't know, a fire. Well, that could become newsworthy if that's a narrative that's useful for whoever's controlling the distribution of the information in the first instance. Like I say, it's just a substitute or replacement for television. And we are part of that structure and equally guilty, therefore can easily be leveraged to that end if we happen to propagate a piece of information that's useful for whatever means of control. Now, again, my grasp of the understanding of the situation I find myself in doesn't mean that I'm not going to do it. I know at certain levels I'm going to be part of the control structure, whether I like it or not. We've talked about putting strawman coats on when you go to the DVLA or whatever and get your license, so you're not being pulled over and having to claim freeman rights just to move around in your car. Some things you just have to accept that you're going to have to put your strawman coat on and get on with it, work within the system, so you don't get hassle. Well, this is similar in terms of how you can detach yourself from TV, or I did when I was about 15 or 16 years old and I just left home, to how you can detach yourself from the exact same thing in the modern form, which is social media. Social media. It says it's in the title.
You ain't kidding. But Neil would never say that if he didn't have proof. You should know that, Nathan.
Yeah, okay. I'll apologise to you, Neil. My assumption was that it was being parroted off perfectly in line with my example, but to your credit, Neil, you did actually have enough for me to apologise and say, fine, in this example, yeah, you're perfectly reasonable in terms of parroting that off. That seems perfectly acceptable. I'll apologise, but I ended up looking much more stupid. Just take that as solace. Take solace in that.
How do we know that wasn't a sheet of paper?
I knew it. I knew someone would go to the hyperskepticism position, which is equally valid, and I could have gone there. Just let Neil have his victory. I don't want to go to the hyperskepticism, so that just makes me seem like a total weasel.
I have a story that will back you up, Nathan.
I have a primary source
Two
for
stories.
you in Skype.
I've heard Brian say you back me up, so everyone else shut up.
No!
Yeah.
I just posted a link with the primary source. Check it out.
No, thank you. I take it as read, actually, by this point, Arwin, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead,
You
Brian.
bastard! No, it's fine.
Yeah. My friend, she's Bulgarian, and she used to live with us years ago. She used to live with me years ago back. She's close on 10 years ago. And the last time I saw her was in 2018. I met up with her in London, and I never told her I was a flat earther, but she was a very open-minded person. Anyway, she's that kind of a person. But I never said that to her about the flat earth thing, because I hadn't seen her for a few years before that, and we just didn't want to get into all that flat earth stuff. And recently I told her I was a flat earther. She contacted me online, and I recently told her I was a flat earther. I said, I never actually told you this, but I've been a flat earther since 2015. And she was totally okay about it. She didn't really say much to me about it, but she did then send me a link, right? And it was called, I can't remember, I'd have to look at the link now to get the exact title, but it was like something like Gravity Does Not Exist, right? Or The Real Gravity, or something like that. And what was it? It was dielectric acceleration. So there's word of mouth. Now, she doesn't know any different. She's not, as to the best of my knowledge anyway, she's not schooled in any of this. She doesn't know any different. This is just something that she would have come across, like she'd come across a lot of things. She'd search all kinds of stuff. But dielectric acceleration was what she sent me. A video on dielectric acceleration. And not so much to kind of school me on anything or tell me, it's just a kind of a nod in my direction. But she obviously has been given the impression by somebody that this is a thing, and it's a proven thing, and there you go. But that is from social media, that she's getting this thing that she's been given the impression is a real proven thing, and it causes things that we see happening when there isn't evidence for that at all. There is really dielectrics and stuff like that, but they don't cause what we see.
So, Brian, months ago when you and I were saying we need to fight against this, and we were brought to some ghost story by Nathan, we were actually on point, correct?
Oh, well, yeah, let's fight the minority when the entire Western world thinks they're on a sphere.
Whoa. He just said he got information from a girl in Bulgaria, and they're promoting dielectric acceleration. They forgot the incoherent part.
Well, you've whistled past the graveyard in terms of the point. My first question to you is, what's your primary source information? I didn't invalidate the claim purely based on the distribution method, which is social media. Yes, the clue is in the title in terms of how it's going to be manipulating you the same way any media does in that regard. But my point wasn't that. My point overall, Neil, was to say that you need to critically analyse any information that you acquire. View it with a certain degree of scepticism, and if you want to parrot it off, make sure you actually do your research and check whether or not it's valid, and then you can present that along with the claim that you're making if you're making one. Now, in this instance, Brian's giving an example of how somebody's just come across the information on social media and then hasn't done any research thereafter. They've just parroted it off to him. Well, that's on them. That's not on the distribution method. That's not just, oh, it's come from YouTube, it's come from Facebook, so it's bad and wrong. No. There's plenty of perfectly valid information, and benign in most cases. 99% of what's on Facebook is completely benign. Again, it dilutes it down so that when information does reach whoever it's intended for, it's also seen as just as benign as the rest of the stuff that's on there. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth, but it does ultimately leave you with the same position. If you're going to poison your brain with that crap, then at least analyse it with some degree of scepticism in the first instance. Now, if you affirm what is being said to your satisfaction, then great. But in many instances, you won't. And I'm going to expand out on my example with Joe Rogan, because if, for instance, there was a certain faction that, even though he'd shown that it was prescribed, wanted to smear him for whatever reason, and then they heard me prior to getting clarity about the prescription being presented on that particular show, you hear me saying, well, what physical evidence is there that it was prescribed? Now, my ignorance of the fact that it was held up and actually shown could easily be distributed out to millions of people because he's needing to be smeared for whatever reason. Now, the fact that he's actually held it up at that point is irrelevant because I've said with such confidence, well, there's no evidence. That's effectively what I'm saying at that point. Well, if that's the narrative you need to be spinning, even though he's given the evidence, it's irrelevant because all that matters is what people are saying. And if what they want people to be saying is the same as me in my total ignorance of what was actually shown and demonstrated, I've got no prior knowledge of it, saying, well, have you actually done some primary research in terms of whether or not there even was a prescription? Oh, you haven't? Because I cut you off, Neil. Yeah? And then that could just become the narrative, even though it's even been disproved before it was said. Do you see where I'm going? Yes, Nathan, we think it's a great example. I'm glad you're all behind me on this one.
Yes,
really,
I do.
Really
I was
warms
just
my
bringing
heart.
up the other. I do. I was just bringing up the other thing about dielectric acceleration that we were bracing against, and you said it's no big deal.
It isn't a big deal. Likewise, we could spend the rest of the next 6 months focusing on whether or not prescriptions have been distributed. Not really that big a deal, though. And in terms of a new paradigm that somebody's attempting to kindle, you know, they're getting a spark next to it, and hopefully a few onlookers see the spark. Well, compared to the house fire that is the heliocentric model, I think I've got better things to worry about, Neil. No offence. I know.
I think
people
Nathan's
say,
saying let's handle
Maybe that's how
I just
heliocentrism got started. Okay?
Yeah.
People
Right.
didn't have the time.
yeah, I'm sure
Exactly, Neil.
Well,
Yeah.
heliocentrism is like the fire station, and it's like on fire all the time, but they constantly just go out and try to turn out, like, extinguish other fires everywhere and teach them about fire safety, as literally the fire station itself is completely burned down.
Yeah, teach them about fire safety. Teach them about critical thought. Don't teach them that this individual model or idea is wrong, because in many ways you're going to stifle people's at least attempts to be creative. Now, I appreciate that can very quickly develop into a replacement for the paradigm you've just realised is wrong. But those people, again, a couple of weeks ago we were talking about this, they only appreciate it's wrong not because they've exercised critical thought, but because they've had somebody put a really good presentation together and convince them in the presentation. And that's it. They've just found a new paradigm. And instantly, they're the people normally that will start off their journey going, well, what's the answer to this then? How do you explain that? How do you explain this? It's like, why aren't you asking yourself that? Why aren't you saying, how do I explain this? Now I don't know anymore. No, you're just on a path looking for a new guru, looking for a new model. And when you find one, you'll start parroting it off like you did with the old one. Well, I'm not here to try and debunk people who are just on the route and path to find a new guru and a new model to replace the old one. What I'd love to do is to get people to exercise some sort of critical thought when they come across any information. You know, exercise your critical thought towards this, and you'll be good. I won't need to be there telling you what model's wrong.
Right. When you come across something new, see it as data. Data is what it is. It is the data. What it is not going to change. It's just that how it's being used in some kind of idea or concept or theory, that might change depending on the mindset of the people where they are at the time, right? So that's how I see it. It's just data gathering and accompanying with that usually ideas about the data. But those ideas can be narrowing down, can be misleading, can lead you on the wrong track. So you just got to see the data for what it is, and then hopefully over time you will be able to figure out what it really means in the bigger context of things.
No, most people won't do that. No, it's beyond most people. I accepted that a few years back. You know, you can't force people to think critically about what they're presented. It just isn't possible. And just can't. I don't want to sound too skeptical, but you know, the reason the control structure is the way it is because most people are just very accepting and gullible. Now, you can't do anything about that. You really can't. You can hope that by passing on the information and showing how, in a process, i.e., day after day, people see a little bit of progress in terms of information that's being revealed on the show. Now, I am like those people in most cases. I'm so lazy. But being lazy doesn't mean that I'm not doing the research. It means that I'm seeking out people who are, and then assessing it on its validity without having to do any research, without having to dig it up. But once it's unearthed, I'll more than happily have a look at it because that involves less effort on my part. And I've always been like that. When it came to flat Earth in the first instance and debunking space, I'd put out a claim that I didn't really know much about, based on the limited information I had, and then wait for the debunkers to come along and offer me all the links to show where I was wrong, which meant that I could go to those links, check out the websites, and realise why they were wrong, without having to go to the effort of actually looking for them. Sly Sparkane was a wealth of knowledge. He was wonderful. You know, when people say, oh, why'd you like Sly Sparkane, and shout his praises, it's like, yeah, because in the early days, he was my best resource. I'd put out a video and there would be Sly Sparkane giving me loads of links to go and have a look at and research. Oh, thank you very much. That saves me the trouble. Well, that's
right,
a shortcut.
That's how I saw... Sorry.
Go on.
That's how I saw Rumpus, because he was always the guy that had all the machinations right at hand, right? And I used that. I used that to see, like, what are they trying to do, right? And it helped me a lot to be exposed to Rumpus because he was always shoving always the latest machinations. He's like top of the line machination man for the anti-flat earthers. And I learned a lot from it. Also, I learned to snap out of it and to see the difference.
Yeah. Well, I remember having a discussion with Fake Spaceman in Space, the first or second interview I ever did on YouTube. And he was describing how he would get a bit scared. He'd put out a video, and then a debunker would come along with a load of links and a load of abuse, and he'd be quite scared to click on the link. And I was thinking, no, not at all. Very pleased. Thank you very much. You know, back in the day, I'd say, oh, welcome, you're my troll now. You're stuck here. You know, you're in hell, and this is your cage. So I'll put out a video, and you'll come out and give me a load of information on it. Well, that's your hell. I'll just say thank you. Thank you very much, troll. Welcome to Oakley Cage.
Well, that's how I found this platform.
Go on, John. Then Neil. Then Brian, sorry.
I was just going to say that's how I found this platform, because I was just like following the breadcrumbs pretty much. Like I was watching Globebusters and, you know, just kind of trolling them. And then, you know, you come on the show over that disagreement you guys had or whatever. And I was like, well, you know, that's a rebuttal at least to the claim, you know, because you look at it from the other side, it looks really bad. You know what I mean?
Wait,
So,
you trolling? What was that like? I can barely believe that even you as a baller would be that bad of a troll.
well, I mean, I wasn't
How were
brutal.
you as a
Well,
troll?
go look at John. Go find John the Morgile. He'll tell you.
Right.
I wasn't brutal. I mean, I would just, point out the contradictions in their logic, accepting my
Right.
own position as true without really thinking about it, But that's all
Right, like a
all I
baller.
did. It was,
So you trolled John the
Yeah.
Morgile specifically, right? That's one that stuck in your mind.
yeah, because he talked about space a lot, and the geometry of it.
Okay, I don't blame you.
Just before you carry on, Arwin. So John the Morgile contacted me yesterday and said he'd like to join the show, do a hangout together. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So hopefully you'll be around when that happens, John, and you and he can reminisce together.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But yeah, but that's what led me here, though, is I was just following, the debate pretty much, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about with, listening to the validity of each claim and just carrying on with it that way.
Yeah, it just takes effort. It takes a lot of effort. So the only effort I can remember actually putting into this discussion was during the curve calculator discussion, where I did do hours and hours and hours and hours of research, and did spend hours and hours sitting up modelling things with Chris Monk, while Anthony fell asleep on his keyboard and disturbed us with snoring, only to expect a summary from me the following morning. Anyway, enough about my insomnia and Anthony snoring. There was a time that I would very much get into the research aspect of it. Now I just like the shortcuts. That's why I'm so grateful and offer so much applause to Brian and 10th Man, and shout out people who are doing this work, because it isn't me. I get privy to the information, and I'm so grateful that I do.
Well, you're like the landlord. You just provide the space, the common space for us to typically gather and do it. Right? And we know that this is the place. We know we can find each other here. So, yeah, you need that too.
It is now, and I'm glad. But back then, it wasn't. When the debate wasn't really established, there was a few subscribers that knew it was in existence, and yeah, it probably got better live numbers back then. But in terms of the consistency, it just wasn't there because it was so new. And there was no way I could get away with just doing what I do now and hoping that people will turn up like 10th Man does and say, hey, look what I've researched. Well, back then I had to actually do the research alongside Anthony and Ranty and Chris Monk and all the rest of them. I'd actually be in it doing the work. Tiring it was. Really was burning the candle at both ends at the beginning, I can tell you that kind of thing. Now the workload...
Well, we were still...
Go on.
Sorry. We were still a bit outnumbered back then, right?
Massively.
We hadn't figured out all the machinations, and the ballers still had like an overhand. They could just easily bluff us to the side, and we didn't really have a rebuttal except for just getting angry. But yeah, that changed dramatically the next few years.
Right, we didn't know the arguments well enough. So we were outnumbered, and the fallacies are well laid down in structure and argumentation and consensus view after the fact, even in anti-flat earth terms. Now, back then we didn't even know what anti-flat earth meant. So when someone comes and starts challenging your vague understanding of how Coriolis works and pointing out how they definitely know better, but enough to convolute the subject into you having to apologise for us not seeing an effect that the globe claims, that's how it used to roll. Well, that was then, and they outnumbered us and strawmanned us and stereotype fallacy and false dichotomy us to all hell with their R-value-based mathematics. But like I say, I think you're right. Now it's progressed beyond that. The table's completely turned a couple of years ago, I would say, with the onset of people's understanding of the scientific method.
I
That
would
was
like
turning
to say,
point, yeah.
Go on, Brian. Sorry, Owen.
Yeah, just so I'm going to keep it on point. That you remember we were talking earlier on about how the whole height of the sun was given to us because ballers did angle what they called angle measurements and told us the sun was 4,000 miles high over our flat plane, on our flat model, all this rubbish. Well, that ended all that kind of stuff kind of came to a 90% halt in 2016 when quantum eraser turned up and with Robert Bassano. Because what happened then is all this nonsense that was pseudoscience that we couldn't really see as pseudoscience. We didn't understand it. We weren't able to differentiate between what was correct and what was incorrect. And QE was able to point out very clearly to us and to the ballers, us on our side and the ballers, what was science and what was not science. And things like your 4,000 mile high sun. How did you validate any of this? What did you use to do that? You know what I mean? It's like, what angles? You don't use angles for that. You know, things like that. So he actually moved on the argument by several years in just 1 year. Because they would have continued on that nonsense in 2018 or 19. It would have taken us a couple of years more to get around the nonsense.
Right.
But
we'd
because
still be,
he knew. Yeah.
Exactly. We'd still be here in 2021 arguing about why a flight route doesn't work on an azimuthal equidistant globe projection.
Well, he knew the arrow. He was so used to debating as well. He was at the dealing with so many of the evolution crowd. He knew the debate tactics. He made a point of knowing them. So he spent like years before that, more than a decade, debating. And he was used to these kind of tactics, you know, begging the question, all this kind of nonsense. So because he had such an interest in that, that he had he just knew fallacies that most people don't spot. It takes time to spot these things, you know. So he did move on the argument, you know, several years in just 1 year.
Absolutely,
right, he did introduce the academics a lot. But before that time, we did know the difference, though, sort of, without the method completely defined, the scientific method. We just saw it like, oh, that's scientism. Remember? It started out, it's scientism, it's fake science.
Yeah, and that was
so
just
we
as
already
dangerous.
knew this is math and all that, so it's not real. But QE definitely solidified it with the academics insertion.
We had a blunt tool, a hammer, and we needed a sword. And throwing science under the bus by calling it scientism was definitely not the way forward. Anyway,
no, because if you would have continued on that path, then quantum mechanics would have destroyed you.
Right. No, we've got at least the mainstream scientifically validated rhetoric behind us to even be contemplating how and why we're allowed to be in this arena without any challenge. Only a overt censorship that isn't even censorship in many ways. Any more? If not, I'm going to round out.
I still think that even before, when we used scientism, it wasn't all that bad, and we had at least figured out where they are abusing math. We already knew, like, there's things wrong with this. There's things wrong with these formulas that they use, right? We felt gate-kept by their mechanics.
We knew something was wrong, but I honestly think that the way we were going about it was a very bad way. Anyway, I'm going to round out on that note. So with that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's after show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, for hopefully smashing the super chat, PayPal link, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.